So we're going to talk about this great wealth transfer you hear about all the time, but we're going to take a little bit of a different take on it in that we're going to talk a little bit about making sure you have the right expectations of what this great wealth transfer may actually mean to you. And then we'll talk a little bit about the notion of staggered retirement. It's more and more at the office when we visit with folks as we help them plan their retirement. Oftentimes, in a couple, they're not necessarily on the same page in terms of timing. There may be a host of reasons behind that. So we're going to talk about some of those reasons and then how you kind of navigate through the unique issues that are presented when folks engage in sort of a bit of a staggered retirement. So those are our topics du jour here on Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. One of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, also a top 25 financial planning podcast. My name is Joel Garris, a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary. Joining me on this week's program, fellow certified financial fiduciary Zach Keister. Zach, welcome to the program as always.
Thank you. It's always a good time to be here.
Always excited to have you on the program. This, of course, is a long-running program. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about what Zach and myself do during the weekday, you should go to our website at Nelson Financial Planning, and there you can learn much more about us and the entire team at Nelson Financial Planning, fully designed to basically help you make better decisions with your money. That has been our mission now since 1984, and we encourage you to learn more about us. So speaking of things to learn more about, Zach, we're going to kind of dig into what sort of popped up in the headlines over the course of the past week. Certainly created a little bit more volatility in the market over the course of the past several days, and that is this conversation about tariffs. Tariff on, tariff off. I guess we're in the land of tariff on perhaps a little bit more this past week.
At least for the moment. It's a very light on, light off situation, so we'll see what comes of that.
And, you know, that's interesting. It really does seem like there is a direct overlay then in terms of what the market is doing in terms of its volatility. If there's concern that there's going to be extensive tariffs, sort of the tariff on, then you're seeing some more volatility in the market versus if we go to tariff off, then things are a little bit more stable.
And it's very quick to react. As soon as the news spreads so quickly nowadays that as soon as it comes out, the market usually has a reaction one way or the other.
Those are some powerful tweets that are happening in Washington that can kind of shift things very quickly. But behind all of that, what's interesting, and this is kind of what we wanted to talk a little bit about this morning, is the tariff conversation, the impact of that, not perhaps as dramatic. And we've identified, I think, Zach, 5 different things that, sort of make this not quite as dramatic of an impact on the economy as sort of what was anticipated when all of this conversation started here at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and we have 5 different things of how tariffs have not wrecked the economy, and we'll share some practical takeaways and some tips and some things that you can do personally to continue to invest with confidence throughout these conversations of tariff on, tariff off.
Right. No, indeed. And as you know, Zach, last week I attended perhaps the only national conference that I bothered to attend. It's kind of an invitation only, about 100 people from around the country, and it was actually held in Washington, D.C. this year, and so sort of an interesting perspective that we got visiting our nation's capital this past week as well, that will kind of intersperse into this conversation. But I guess we'll start with the numbers. When we talk about tariffs, we talk about sort of a statutory tariff rate of around 17%. Certainly, and this was the message out of Washington at the conference this past week, certainly companies have sort of figured out ways to navigate around, whether that's rerouting trade or sort of front running some shipments or taking advantage of loopholes in the bureaucratic system. Actual rate paid is coming in at closer to about 11%.
Yeah, and with the recent changes, most experts are putting the rate at around 15% or so. So are tariffs higher? Yes, absolutely they are, but they're not necessarily as drastic as the headlines may paint them to be. It's actually closer to around 11%.
Right. So and what's interesting is, I think this is a good example of where anytime you have a regulatory issue or something that's different, companies have a tendency to adapt. I mean, that's what they do. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And so the market, also adapts as well. Businesses sort of find a way to minimize those costs. And I think the biggest distinction comes into play, and this kind of gets into some takeaways for investors to be paying attention to right now, is, look, large multinational companies are going to be able to sort of navigate through these, just like any other regulatory issue that they can navigate, and so there you're seeing less of an impact versus smaller companies, private companies, regional companies, where you're seeing a much greater impact of these tariffs. So that helps to kind of guide people, and when they think about what their investment mix needs to look like now, kind of where is the impact really getting felt on a regular basis.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And this is not something that came like a thief in the night either. We all knew this was coming. We have heard all these conversations for quite a while, so this didn't just magically appear one day. So, like you mentioned, corporations have had some time to settle in and think about what their strategy is going to be going forward.
No question. And it's not to say that these don't have a real impact, right? I mean, so for large multinational companies, okay, fine, they can kind of navigate through this. But the reality is that 80% of companies in America today that have more than $100 million in revenue, those are private companies. So that gives you a little less flexibility. So certainly not to say that there's not a real impact, but perhaps not as dramatic, particularly if you're thinking about an investment allocation that is a little bit more focused on sort of those large multinational companies. That is for sure. And then of course, you've got the possible macroeconomic impact, that broader impact, Zach, and you've got some, kind of some stats on kind of what the impact there is.
Yeah, and kind of the rule of thumb on that is every 1% increase in tariff bumps inflation by 0.1%. And slows down GDP growth by 0.05%. So with tariffs rising from 2% up to 11%, we've seen inflation tick up and grow slow, but not collapse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other part is, certainly GDP growth probably impacted, but you're talking maybe less than 1%. Some would say even it's closer to 0.5%. Inflation up a little bit, but again, not as dramatic in terms of the impact. And certainly different companies are seeing that impact differently. And then, what's interesting, Zach, is, you overlaid all of this AI stuff, which is a big part of the conversation. And, perhaps there may be a little bit of a penicillin that is providing the economy, the labor markets, productivity markets, those types of things, that is helping to kind of smooth out the economic impact of these tariffs over time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I hate to say it, but inflation is not something that you can control, I can control, or any of us can control individually. The only thing we can do is control the things that we can control in our own house. So what can you do personally? You can plan for it. You can plan, you can save, and invest for the long term. And just kind of think, keep in the back of the mind, but it's not necessarily something that you have ultimate control of on a personal level.
No, and I think the biggest, one of the biggest things is always to make sure that your budget, when you have a budget, right, you've got to have some type of room to maneuver. You can't be running your budget down to the penny every time. And certainly that's part of the exercise about budgeting. And one of the things that, one of the exercises that we have in our new companion workbook to our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, the companion workbook that just came out now this month, kind of has that exercise. So it all kind of ties in together, if you will. So we're going to take a break and continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris and Zach Keister of Nelson Financial Planning after these messages. Talking about tariffs, Zach, kind of working through, kind of some of the explanation as to here we are. It's kind of mid-October, and we've been talking about tariffs since the beginning of the year. And while certainly there's been some times where tariffs have caused some short-term reactions in the market, in particular, most recently over the past few days of late. But the impact not as dramatic as sort of what was feared.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Boy, it's only been since the beginning of the year. It's felt like a lifetime we've been talking about this.
That is very true. As we said before the break, tariffs at the end of the day, the impact probably about roughly a rate of around 11% versus kind of a 17% that's statutorily prescribed. Large companies, multinational companies have a tendency to kind of being able to navigate through these as best as possible. And the impact somewhat gradual in nature, particularly when you kind of look, the tariffs are not new. And when we think about, even under the prior administration, the monthly revenue from tariffs was probably around 7, maybe 8 billion. Okay, obviously now it's closer to 30 billion. So obviously that's a big difference. But it's not like that we're going from a situation where they did not exist and now they exist. But obviously they exist in a different form and fashion than they used to. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, it's not like this is a brand new concept. These have been around for a long time. It's just the rates are changing a little bit. And so companies are finding ways to adapt. Some companies are hoping that tariffs are temporary. Some have kind of held off on passing off the cost to consumers, at least for now, until this gets settled in. As a consumer, don't be so concerned about the short term. Continue to think more long term of how this is going to affect you.
No, and I think that's very true. And certainly the impact or the pain, if you will, is certainly a little bit more spread out. I mean, the reality is also that these trade negotiations are certainly ongoing, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that continues to be a part of the headlines. And certainly the drama can resurface from time to time. Mexico, Canada, all those types of places still are adjusting. Obviously, China, big part of the conversation of late. But that's just kind of one piece, really, of the overall economic equation at the end of the day.
Right, and this is these are conversations that happen all the time. These negotiations happen. Another one happens next year, so nothing new. Yeah,
I mean, certainly when you think about the broader economy, you start to think about interest rates, you start to think about fiscal policy, and let's not forget the all-important, particularly here in this country, the all-important consumer, what they do and their ability to continue to spend, often a big driver of the economy, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and a key takeaway from this is don't let the headlines dictate your investment strategy. We're thinking that diversification is more important now than ever. Spread it out. Think about the big picture. Think about your investment allocation when it comes to these tariffs.
Well, and we talk about this a lot with our clients. The importance of rebalancing and maintaining the kind of investment mix that you want, that matches with your objectives, that's going to get you through whatever the times might be. And the reality is that, if you think about what's going on over the past couple of years, I mean, as the stock market has gone up, if you have not rebalanced your account, the reality is you're quite a bit out of whack versus what your potential target investment allocation was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things have definitely changed. We obviously pay attention to the funds and the internals of the funds, and we've seen those change as well.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that globalization is certainly not ending. I mean, obviously the supply lines and all of that, a lot of changes afoot, but certainly not, globalization not going away in today's world. So, bottom line, as we say on a regular basis, make sure you kind of keep your eyes on your goals and objectives, and think about more of that investment allocation, kind of how to kind of tariff-proof your portfolio as best as possible by focusing more on those larger, more multinational companies. So certainly a lot of takeaways to kind of figure out how you navigate through this tariff conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of takeaways, probably also need to share some of our takeaways for folks that are navigating through this great wealth transfer. Everybody's talking about it, Zach. So what's happening out there?
Folks are definitely talking about it. Well, let's start with kind of the elephant in the room, if you will, and that's expectations, which can have a lot of weight to it. Surveys have shown that many Gen Zers are expecting to inherit somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000, some even anticipating $1 million or more. But what is the reality of this? Most baby boomers plan to leave less than $250,000. So important to set the expectation of what is going to happen.
You might also want to look at your family tree and how many siblings you have, because the more siblings you have, that gets generally divided up among more people, which means that you are, in fact, getting less. So check your family tree. That may check your expectations. And, of course, the reality is things like inflation, right? Mm-hmm. Healthcare costs, particularly end of life, can certainly eat away at a lot of that impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And also as well, modern medicine, people are living longer, so life expectancy has gone up as well. So, most importantly, though, most people don't talk about their money. Most family members, between children and parents, don't have these conversations. In fact, a recent article from CNBC found that only 14% of Americans consider themselves wealthy, and fewer than half of baby boomers have had a financial conversation with their children at all.
Yeah, well, then that's big, because that lack of communication certainly is the chief way in which you wind up building those unrealistic expectations, right? So one thing to think, oh, mom and dad look like they're doing good. They just went on a trip to Europe. They must have a bunch of money. The reality is that if you're not communicating, you're creating expectations that might be very, very different than the reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something you need to talk about and sit down and have a real conversation on. One side needs to start the conversation now, whether that's the baby boomer side or the Gen Z side. That's
the giver or the
there.
receiver. I would say that's probably more likely in the giver court. But the other part of it is, and this is something that we see more and more as well, is there's kind of this embrace of using your money now. I mean, Zach, I can tell you, a decade ago in the office, we rarely heard of folks that would come in and say, hey, you know what, I want to take $25,000 or even more out of my investment portfolio and use that as a way to help my kids. And obviously the biggest need in today's world is housing. And we have that conversation quite a bit these days.
Quite a bit, yeah. Helping out their children get their first home or get their first car, or helping them pay off the student loans. So, yeah, it's definitely becoming more of a frequent conversation.
But the reality is the more of that gets used now, the less you're going to have later. So just know that there's some key distinctions to make sure that you're thinking about. That's for sure.
Yeah, one way or the other. So you got to either get it now or get it later. But it's very important to at least have the conversation.
Right. Well, and then understand about the notion of, well, okay, what's actually being inherited, because some of that then comes with different issues or different things that you need to really kind of think about when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that is really coming is the real estate. So we got all kinds of exciting things to dive into when we come back here.
Perfect. That sounds good. That's a good way to segue out. We'll be back after these messages here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris and Zach Keister of Nelson Financial Planning.
On the program today, we're talking about a myriad of things, and one of those items is things baby boomers and Generation Z need to be talking about regarding the great wealth transfer. So when we took a break, we were starting to get into what's being inherited from baby boomers, and the one item is real estate, which is a major part of the wealth transfer. A lot of folks will think, oh, this is a wonderful item that I'm getting, but they don't necessarily understand all that comes along with that. It can turn into a financial burden very quickly. Property taxes and maintenance can turn a dream into a burden very, very quickly.
Well, and the reality is when let's say you finally reach the decision of, okay, we're going to go and sell it, more often than not, and we see this a lot, where before you can sell it and before the potential buyer actually can get insurance on it, they need a new roof, and so there goes $20, $30, and on up $1,000 to cover the new roof. So certainly understanding what it is that I am inheriting, and oftentimes, Zach, you're right. I mean, it's going to be a house. That's the single biggest asset for most families is that house, and yeah, that's not just cash sitting in a checking account.
No, and it takes a little bit of work as well, like you mentioned. A lot of times, especially here in Florida, you got to redo the roof, and then you got to hire a realtor, and then you got to clean it out, maybe have an estate sale. It's not just cash sitting on the table, waiting there for you. It's going to take a process.
No, that's exactly right.
So the next item is retirement accounts. Now, this has changed within the last 5 years. So there's different rules than there used to be. You know, if you've inherited an IRA within the last 5 years, you now potentially have to take all that money out within 10 years, which could be a big tax bill.
Significant. And that's really a bright line, you know, starting January 1 of 2020, where prior to that, you really could spread that out over the course of the rest of your lifetime. Post that date, January 1, 2020, then you've got sort of this 10-year rule, and the clock is ticking. And you need to make sure that you are taking that money out within that period of time, and what that ultimately means is that you're going to have to pay a bunch of taxes on it too.
Yeah, so another important piece of the plan, if you will. So needs to be part of the discussion, definitely.
Well, and that just kind of, you know, talking about the plan, I mean, you know, the notion and the importance of having an overall sort of estate plan, right? And using that as a way to not just to avoid probate, but to ensure that assets are getting transferred to those folks that you are actually wanting to get the assets, and so the importance of that quality estate plan, and double checking beneficiaries, all of those kinds of things that we talk about all the time on the program, so crucial to make sure that you know that you're taking advantage of that.
Such an easy conversation to have with folks about making sure your beneficiaries are correct. You know, take the 5 or 10 minutes. This is your legacy you're talking about, your legacy that you're trying to give on to the next generation. Take the couple of minutes and verify that they are who you want them to be.
Yep. No, absolutely. And then, you know, the reality is that in today's world, there's so many different sort of scams and things that you can run into that, I mean, this is a vulnerable time, and we've certainly seen where, you know, the obituaries are often used as a fertile ground for exploitation, and so that's the other thing. You know, when we think about this, you've got to be careful, particularly with kind of all of the technology and all the different scams out there these days. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gen Z has partially been susceptible to getting financial advice from very different places, we'll say. Over-reliance on social media, the lack of formal financial education, and trust in online influencers to get their financial advice. So definitely a lot spinning out there, and every corner of the web has a different opinion on what to do with your finances.
Well, and that's also kind of, it's interesting about that comment, Zach, is that there's a generational perspective difference as well. I think you were the one who showed me the study where, like 56% of boomers, okay, say that they would turn to a financial professional for assistance on that. If you look at that number, Gen Z totally like flipped. 61% would rather rely on kind of family and friends, and good intentions don't lead to necessarily good advice.
Not always.
On that.
Not always.
But that unfortunately is where you can run into some real shortcomings. So I mean, as we were saying at the beginning of this part of the conversation, Zach, the real issue is just really thinking through and starting to have those ongoing conversations to help to set the expectations correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always about the dollars. It's about the values as well. Look, the great wealth transfer has a significant impact. And so these need to be ongoing conversations, not something maybe you just sit around the kitchen table one time for 5 minutes. This is probably something you guys need to have a long-term conversation on over a long time period.
Well, and of course with the holidays coming up, that's a great time when family gets together. And I know there's always a hesitancy of, I don't want to do it then. I want it to be a nice time. But look, whatever the difficulty is that you might have with this conversation now, you are saving yourselves a magnitude increase in these conversations that might wind up happening after you're gone, as people try and sort of sort through things. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why we wrote our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. That's also one of the biggest reasons why we, also then this year just published just a few days ago our companion workbook that really takes that to the next level and creates some exercises to give you the opportunity to sort of talk through these very issues with your loved ones.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen this play out many different ways over the years, and just the burden that is put onto the air, if you will, sometimes because of the lack of conversations and lack of planning, and certain things turn into a surprise after the fact.
Yeah, that companion workbook, as we've mentioned, Next Gen Dollars and Cents companion workbook, all updated for 2025. So it's got a host of stuff about the one big beautiful bill in there as well, along with real practical exercises that takes the content of the book and sort of encourages you to kind of make it personal through the use of a variety of exercises. Companion workbook, yours free between now and the end of the year, simply by visiting our website at Nelson Financial Planning or calling the office to request your absolutely free copy of that companion workbook. And if you need an extra copy of our original book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, I bet you anything, whoever you talk to at the office, they'll be happy to kind of slide a free copy of that in there as well. So some important things to be thinking about, and really to kind of help engage in the conversation, particularly during the course of this time of year when family, friends, and all of that are home. And Zach, to your point, an opportunity to also kind of talk about the values as well. And I think that's something that is important. Money's money, but you want to make sure that it is treated in the way that you would want it to be treated by the next generation.
So when you do have these conversations, what are some things that Generation Z needs to be asking? Well, what do I want this money to do? How do I want to honor my family's legacy while building my own? What causes or charities matter to me? And how do I balance spending, saving, and giving?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great questions to ask. With that, we would also overlay, making sure that you're getting educated, building a plan, working with professionals as a way to kind of really help to understand what exactly this is. But yeah, bottom line, as we started, make sure you got the right expectation. It's not necessarily going to be a big old pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Not necessarily. It's going to be some work as well. It's not just going to be, like we said, cash just sitting on the table.
No, absolutely. So certainly some things to be thinking about with that. We're going to take a break here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris and Zach Keister of Nelson Financial Planning. We'll be back after these messages. So we covered a lot on this episode of Dollars and Cents. Fortunate enough to have Zach Keister join me, Joel Garris, on the program. Zach, we started off with a conversation about tariffs, right? We then got into having the right expectations as it results to the great wealth transfer, and what folks need to know about that.
Yeah, and as well as some questions that both sides need to be asking. Before the break, we were on the side of what Gen Z needs to be asking. Again, that was, what do I want this money to do? How do I honor my family's legacy while building my own? What causes or charities matter to me? And how do I balance spending, saving, or giving? Now, there's also a flip side of this, and what baby boomers need to be asking the Gen Z recipients.
There's a few questions that they might want to ask as well. What's on that list, Zach?
So first up is, do you know what you would do if you got this inheritance tomorrow? And how would you handle that? So that really can lay some groundwork of what's going to happen once this passes on to them, especially if that's kind of a bit of a spur of the moment question. You're going to get probably a pretty honest answer.
Yeah, maybe even over the holiday dinner after a glass of wine, you may get an even more honest answer depending upon your family dynamics. But it's funny. Speaking about the family dynamics, and I think this is a good segue to kind of our last topic that we teed up at the beginning of the program, and that is this notion, and we're seeing this more and more, where couples are experiencing staggered retirement, meaning that they are not really necessarily retiring at the same time. One may still be working, the other may be retiring, and there's a host of reasons for that, not always about the money, or it may just be more about personal readiness, career satisfaction, or kind of even on the health side of things.
Yeah, even on the health side of things. There's a very interesting statistic that we found on this. Most people imagine that both partners leave work at the same time, but in reality, only 11% of Americans actually retire together. In fact, 62% retire more than 1 year apart.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that. I mean, that's only 1 in 10 that are retiring together. 2/3, it's an extended difference, if you will, in terms of the timing. And then that obviously, as we were just talking about, important to have good communication. And also ultimately to sort of understand the emotional side that comes with that, right? Because maybe there can be some jealousy or resentment or any of those kinds of things that come with that staggered retirement situation.
And we definitely have heard those conversations before.
Correct.
I have to keep going to work while the other gets to play and have fun, or vice versa. Yeah.
No, and oftentimes, there can be some real reasons why. I mean, obviously, maintaining at least one piece of income. Healthcare, often a big reason, and healthcare coverage, often a big reason why there's a difference. We just had someone in the office this past week. There's age difference. 5 years age difference. So obviously, the older one is eligible for things like Medicare and things like that at an earlier stage than the younger one of the couple, and that's an important consideration.
It's a huge consideration. We have that conversation very frequently of what's going to happen with the health insurance? I mean, that's a large piece of the discussion. So that often ends up being why one of them continues to work for at least a couple more years.
Right, and then overlay that, things like the timing of when you decide to take Social Security, all of those kinds of things. And maybe there's a strategy where, one has sort of had enough. I'm thinking of a couple that we visited with recently that she was a school teacher, and generally, after doing that for a while, you kind of have enough, or at least that's kind of what we hear in the office. And but he really enjoyed his job, and it was outside, and he enjoyed it, and so no intention of wanting to retire, and then, but the required reality is that it does require some planning, even in those kinds of situations where you've still got that one income still coming in. But in this case, it was, okay, what can we do to comfortably make up for her loss of income without having to rely too heavily on the assets? So those are the kinds of things that, as with anything, you've got to really kind of work it through and think through those possibilities.
Once again, another conversation is needed.
Right. Certainly the importance of having a conversation and engaging in that certainly applies when you've got a couple that's looking to retire at different ages, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we've seen this, and we've had many of these conversations where one of them is ready to retire and travel and do another different type of adventure, and the other one's like, well, I'm going to keep on working. So Then it's kind of like, well, where do you go from here? You obviously got to go one way or the other. So very important to have that conversation to make sure that you're both on the same page going forward.
Well, and then you overlay kind of the emotional aspects of that we talked about earlier. That it's important to have that full conversation. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So here's a couple of actionable steps that you can take with your partner. Discuss retirement planning timely. Plan for income needs. Decide when to take Social Security, consider emotional impacts, and consult a financial planner to model different scenarios. Because there's all kinds of different scenarios, right? One's going to keep working, one's going to retire, you're both going to retire at the same time. This idea of staggered retirement, say maybe it's 1 year, 3 years, there's a whole host of ideas and things that need to be figured out when you go down that road.
No, and certainly some good highlights to really kind of talk through as a couple in terms of what it's going to look like, and also the impact that it's going to have on your budget. I mean, again, it is, those statistics do not lie. When we talk about only 11% of couples will retire at the same time, 2/3 will retire, at least a year apart. We just see that all the time. Maybe one's ready or not ready. Maybe one wants to spend a little bit more time with the grandkids, or it's just the fear of losing that schedule, which we forget when we work. There's a lot of value and emotional and physical and mental benefits that come from it.
Yeah, and we've seen those statistics over and over again about tying to continue to work and having an individual purpose with life and work connected. So yeah, very, very important.
So important, and to really make sure that you're planning and is addressing this particular issue, because as you mentioned, Zach, you've got healthcare coverage that comes into play. You've got income that comes into play. I mean, so many different things where you've got to really kind of plan it through. It really gets back to what we always talk about on the program and when people visit us in the office, is that financial planning isn't kind of some one size fits all kind of thing.
Not at all, and it's not something that you just set and forget either. It's an ongoing, continual process to continue to having conversations and figuring out the path ahead. I mean, I've heard a quote before that retirement is not a destination, it's a journey, because it continues. It doesn't just, you're not going to one place and that's it. I mean, this is the rest of your life you've got to consider and continue to plan for here.
Well, and that's kind of what makes our days interesting at the office, is obviously we engage in these conversations on a daily basis, many times throughout the course of the day, the entire team, just kind of working through these types of discussions. And You know, Zach, it's not just a one conversation and done. I mean, there's usually a series of 2 or 3 conversations that are crucial to kind of really lay out the game plan, not just in terms of what it looks like and the emotional side, but you've really got to start kind of digging into the financial side as well in order to kind of have things be as tax efficient as possible when you're looking at generating that income.
Right, and there's all these different scenarios with I'm going to retire today or I'm going to retire 3 years from now and everything in between. And numbers change, goals change, ideas, physical locations change. You might move. It just never ends.
So to learn more about how we might be able to help you, if any of these types of scenarios apply, where you're looking at a staggered retirement, or you're concerned about tariffs, or maybe you've got to have a conversation with the next generation about that potential wealth transfer, check out our website at nelsonfinancialplanning.com. There you can not only learn about more about us, but you can also schedule an absolutely free conversation. So we encourage you to do that. With that, we're going to wrap it on up and get on out of here. This has been Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris, Zach Keister of Nelson Financial Planning. Thanks for listening to the program.